Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Taylor Newman, the Executive Director of the National Intercollegiate Flying Association. And today we have with us Mike Magic McLean, Lieutenant Colonel in the United States Navy. And going to tell him about he's going to tell you about himself. Moderating today, we have Andrew Ross. Thanks for moderating again, Andrew. Good to see you. And without further ado, thank you all both for volunteering today. And thank you, sir, for your service. And I'll let y'all get at it. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Well, welcome back to the NIFA Aviation Industry Speaker Series once more for 2022. Our very first guest, as Taylor said, is Mike Magic McLean. We're very, very happy to have you, sir. Thank you for your service, and it's quite the service record you have, so we'll get to that here in just a brief minute. But before we start down the question and answer road, you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, your aviation history, your service record, and all the good stuff as a general overview, and we'll come back and dive back into those questions afterwards.
Yeah, so Lieutenant Commander in the United States Navy. Went to the United States Naval Academy as an undergraduate, NIFA competitor, and competed at regionals and nationals. Upon graduation, commissioned as a naval aviator, and went down to flight school in Pensacola, Florida. Did flight training in T-34s and in C-12 aircraft, and was selected to join the Maritime Patrol and Reconnaissance Aviation community. At that time, that meant flying P-3 Orion aircraft. Went through and did initial training in Jacksonville, Florida, where I learned to fly the aircraft, and then was assigned to Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii for my first tour. From that first tour, got the opportunity to go all around the world and use the aircraft. Included doing counter-drug interdiction flights out of El Salvador, anti-submarine flights out of Japan, flying search and rescue operations out of the Horn of Africa, looking for terrorists in the Philippines, and supporting Operation Iraqi Freedom out of in Iraq, in that area. From there, I was lucky enough to select to be a member of the test pilot community. So the Navy first sent me out to the Air Force Institute of Technology, where I received a master's degree in aeronautical engineering, and then went to the Naval Test Pilot School in Pax River, Maryland. Upon graduation, I was assigned to the MQ-4C Triton test program. As part of that, we developed a full flight test regime for the aircraft and worked real hard to bring that aircraft up to its first flight back in 2013. I was also lucky enough to participate in flight tests in the T-6 Texan II aircraft and in the P-8 Poseidon aircraft. After my test tour, went back out to the fleet, joined a operational squadron, VP-16, and was lucky enough to be assigned to VP-16 as it was going out on the maiden deployment of the P-8 Poseidon aircraft. So joined them out in Kadena Air Force Base out in Okinawa, Japan, and really got to lucky enough to see the a brand new aircraft operating in a brand new AOR, and all the interesting challenges that came with it. At the conclusion of that deployment, or at that tour, I transitioned and became an aviation engineering duty officer, meaning that I was no longer deploying out on operational squadrons, but was tied into the test community a little closer. From there, I was assigned to VXS-1, which is a support squadron for the Naval Research Lab, and had the opportunity to facilitate the science that the NRL was doing, implementing new sensors, new tests, new techniques for aviation on some of our manned platforms there. At the conclusion of that tour, I had the opportunity to come back up to the Naval Academy and become an instructor. And so for the past few years, I've been here in the Aerospace Engineering Department, helping teach the midshipmen, prepare them to become future naval officers.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. So let's get into some questions, yeah?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the first one is from a student, and this is kind of a great, I think, springboard because it kind of brings you back to the beginning of your career. What would be your advice to people wanting to become a pilot in the military?
Yeah, that's a really great question. The military, there's lots of different types of military aviation. You've got Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and even some of the other uniform services like NOAA or the Department of Energy. They all have aviation, and they use it to great effect. one of the best things you can do is to go out and get in touch with a recruiter, and kind of find out what they're looking for. One of the important things about the military is that it's service, and it's, when you're called upon to serve, it's only when the military kind of needs to find folks. Right now is a great opportunity. Everyone's looking for pilots, the military included. And so one of the requirements for most aviation programs in the military is to be an officer. And to gain a commission in the military, generally it's going to require a college degree. Technical degrees are slightly preferred, the degrees in that STEM field, and that's going to make you a little bit more competitive. Once you have accepted been accepted into an officer commissioning program, at that point in time, you can look towards whatever services selection criteria they've got. On the Navy side, we've got the ASTB test, and a lot of really good test preps out there, and it's one of those things that if you can kind of show your inclination towards aviation, that'll help you for your selection into those types of programs. But really, for joining the military, the number one priority is being willing to serve your country, and then aviation. If you're lucky enough to have the opportunity to do so, and you find yourself qualified to do so, that's a great opportunity, a great way to do it.
Excellent. So, what would you say are the pros and the cons for flying at, everybody's on this track right now, probably because it's in the media all the time. You hear it all the time, pilot shortage. But what are the pros and cons of going the military route as you have versus, or the pluses and minuses, instead of going through that track that gets probably the most media attention right now?
So one of the things with the military is that we really kind of take the person off the street and get them trained up into aviation. So the Navy and the military in general, we're not looking to hire pilots. We don't need anyone with any previous flying experience. We just need folks who are willing to serve their country and are qualified to do so. And then that's one of the advantages, I think, of really kind of moving through the military, is that the military is going to train you to fly military aircraft. When you look at one of the most important things that the military does, it is training. And if you look at naval aviation, we can take someone who's never been in an airplane before and get them landing on an aircraft carrier in a jet in 2 years. And that's a pretty serious thing. It's intense. It's time consuming. It's a big challenge, but the military will get you through that process, and it's something we're really good at doing. On the civilian side, a lot of that initial training can kind of be put onto the individual for them to find the funding, the opportunities, the jobs that are going to get them to kind of build up those flight hours. In the military, we're going to provide that for you. Now, there are some drawbacks to military aviation, in that when you look at what we're offering to do, it really starts with service. So if you're coming in just because you want to be the pilot or you want to build flight time, that's not really the focus. The focus is to get you ready to go out and serve the country, to fly the missions, to support the armed services and defend the country. So that can require sacrifices, right? So best case scenario, that's going to mean going out on deployment, being away from your family and loved ones for a few months on end, and that's going to require a sacrifice of you and your family. On the civilian side, that there's definitely time away from home, but usually it's not such a prolonged amount of time. The other part, really, in the military side, is that when you're a commissioned officer, the military expects you to be an officer first and then a pilot second. So, a lot of times when it comes time to flying, that's not really my day job. I'm as a lieutenant commander assigned responsibilities and obligations that I have to take care of. And, even the days when I have to go out and maybe do an 8-hour mission, I'm going to come back and my email is going to be full of stuff asking me to take care of those things that I had, the people I was in charge of, making sure they're being taken care of, and, whatever programs I was in charge of, making sure they're running smoothly. So it can definitely be an extra amount of time in your day when you're not actually flying the airplane, because that's not really what your prime mission is going to be. Your prime mission is going to be being an officer, being a leader, protecting and helping out your sailors.
That's great. And it's great to draw that distinction, because I think movies sometimes when you watch it, it gives you that atmosphere that idea that that's all that really happens is that you're flying or you're sitting there resting in the break room. So it's good, I think, to put that out there that there's more to that job, and certainly more fulfilling when you bring that all in. So for those with limited military knowledge, as I'm sure much of our viewership is, unless you're in ROTC or a CAP to some extent or some other area, what drove you to make the decision to go the Navy route, specifically to the Naval Academy, and then obviously Navy after that, versus some of the other options?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'm sure it's a question a lot of people kind of ask themselves. I really was drawn to that idea of the kind of the service to the country and kind of doing a little bit more than just kind of going from A to B. Not to limit the contribution of civilian aviation, but the Navy used to have a slogan, a global force for good. And that's really one of those things that I think really kind of epitomized what I kind of was able to take away. And, one of the things I found really rewarding through my career is that, going out there and flying the aircraft, it really wasn't just about flying the aircraft. It was about what are you doing with the aircraft. So doing counter drug flights out of El Salvador, kind of helping that, that mission set, doing search and rescue missions. I've got a few hundred hours of flying search and rescue where you're going out and, someone's life could be in your hands, that you're going to get out there and use the aircraft for something besides just transportation. And flying in combat zones, maintaining that coverage, providing that support, that lifeline to folks who may be on the ground. That's something that really kind of makes you feel good when you get done doing it. It can be kind of tiring, it can be really challenging. But that when you're flying that aircraft, it's not just about sitting there and and keeping the shiny side up and making coming a nice safe landing back where your destination is. You really are kind of fulfilling that flight time. The flight time may be a little less, but what you're able to accomplish with it is sometimes a little bit more.
Excellent, very good. So we'll go. This is going to kind of shift into your training mindset a little bit, your instructor mindset. But what are your top 3 lessons for pilots in training, given your rich leadership and instructional background?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'd actually say one of the first ones was really something I learned while I was at the Naval Academy, was introduced preparing for NIFA competitions, which was that you have to be really focused on the details. When I first started flying, for me, a good landing was coming in and just kind of having it be nice and smooth, kind of squeaking it in. And it really wasn't until, you kind of get challenged with kind of landing on the spot that you realize that it's not just about that last couple seconds in the flare. It really does kind of build up into the entire pattern. And you really got to kind of challenge yourself and kind of refine those tolerances on your pattern, understanding that, the good landing starts in the downwind. And making sure you're on your numbers, you got good airspeed control, energy management, making sure you're hitting your points, and not letting yourself just kind of be, loose and all over the place out there. Understand that, well, maybe I can save this in the last couple seconds as I make a good flare to recover the approach. That focus on detail, that idea of knowing where you want to be, when you want to be there, recognizing when you're not there, and making a good correction to get back to it. That really is sort of the hallmark of quality flying, and that both in landing competitions and in all of military flying. When we talk about come back and land on the boat, that is one of the key parts to it. You can't let yourself just kind of be off and expect to save it at the last minute. You got to work to be right on conditions the whole way through. Another one is and this is one that I didn't probably pick up as well until I got into full, military aviation, was that there's a lot to be learned in the debrief. So every flight you're going to go on, there's something you can improve on. You don't have to screw up royally to then have to learn your lesson. Every single flight you go out there, you get a good amount of that training in the flight. Then there's a huge training opportunity post-flight. And in the military, we'll do fairly large exercises, multiple aircraft, sometimes ground units, ships, all those other types of things. Hundreds of different players all kind of coming together, and they may be engagements that last 15, 30 minutes. Even though it's only a 15, 30-minute engagement, you can end up having to debrief and analyze those things for 8 to 9 hours afterwards, because there's so much going on, and there's so much into understanding what was it you did, what could you have done better, what was everyone else doing, and kind of taking that ability to kind of really chew and digest and, find your lessons learned, apply it. What can you take out of today's flight that's going to make you better tomorrow? And I'd say the last one, and this one's really important, is that flying should be fun. With those first two, it can get kind of intense, and that's great because you're striving for to make yourself better. But at the same time, you got to understand that if you're not having fun flying, you're probably doing it wrong. And that's not just for your own enjoyment. Sometimes it's also for my relationship to folks I'm instructing with. I don't want to necessarily get so negative, so intense that they kind of have it, they're done with it. There should always be some enjoyment. Anytime you see yourself on the flight schedule, you got that flight coming up. Hopefully you always have that kind of positive energy, looking forward to it, because it should be an enjoyable thing for you.
Those are excellent points. I couldn't agree more. Those are awesome. So you had spent this at the beginning of your career, you'd spend so much time on the operations and then test flight things, and now you're in an instructor role. And so many of our students go from learning to instructing, then to the airlines. What brought you back to instruct? What brought you into instructing? What was that mission that drove you back or drove you into the U.S. Naval Academy as an instructor?
Yeah, it's really interesting because that wasn't something I necessarily intended when I started out. Like a lot of folks, I saw myself join the military and only kind of looked past flight training and doing, flying missions and, all the exciting things that go with that. But at some point, you kind of realize that you don't get to do it forever, especially in the military. If you're lucky, it's a 20-year career. And even in that 20-year career, eventually they kind of stop wanting you to be the pilot, more the person leading the organization. So as we get older, develop, keep progressing, you really do have to, learn to find those ways to kind of find your replacement. And there's a lot of enjoyment in that. I wasn't exactly seeking this out, but having the opportunity, it really is a very rewarding thing to kind of watch people develop that you can assist with, and that's one of those things that it can be real easy in a kind of a grind of an operational tour to kind of get beat down, get discouraged. You got a lot of really long days, and sometimes things are kind of working against you. A lot of impediments, and then to kind of think back onto that initial excitement, that joy that you've got when it came to aviation, when it came to flying, that initial excitement that kind of draws folks into this line of work. That's something that you see a lot of when you're instructing. And one of those things that really kind of recharges the batteries, really kind of keeps you motivated, keeps you reattached to those types of things. And it's something I've been really lucky to been able to experience these past couple of years.
Excellent. I agree. I always think fondly back and still tell a lot of stories of my instructing days, and I instructed the airline, so it's pretty neat that it's a different sort of sense of fulfillment, I think, that you get out of it. So I feel I totally echo your sentiment there. Going back to a career spanning thing to think back on everything, what has been your most defining moment, assignment, or award thus far?
I don't know if there's one most rewarding thing I've done. Everything kind of ties different moments, different pieces that's gone on. I would say that the most rewarding things I've done really haven't been awarded. That's a really odd thing to say, but usually when it's time to get a medal or a citation or whatever, I've typically found that a lot of the relationships I've had with sailors and other service members, that ability to kind of help them in their lives to kind of develop and progress have typically been the most rewarding to me. Looking back, that's those bits of advice that kind of help people get through a hard time or make a good decision. There's a lot to that. And it's not an award necessarily. You're not going to get a medal for helping out a friend or being a good mentor, but that's definitely one of those connections that provides a lot a fulfillment to your life.
Excellent. Excellent. This question that was also submitted, it's I don't know, this is a tough one for me to ask because I never liked getting asked it myself, but I want to ask it because I think it's a great, and because it was submitted, but I think it's a great, sometimes it's great to reflect. What would you change about your career path in the Navy?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. Yeah, it's hard to say, oh, I want to change this or change that. You know, the long winding road gets you to where you're at. I'm real happy where I'm at. And, I gone one way different or the other. I can't guarantee I would have been in as happy a place as I am right now. What I can tell you is that being here at the Naval Academy, I get to talk to a lot of midshipmen who are aspiring naval aviators, and the piece of advice I give them is to not be too rigidly attached to the idea of what you think your career should be. There's a lot of stuff that's outside your control, a lot of outside influences, opportunities, poor timing, good timing. What I've really seen that's been the good piece of advice to give out is to really understand your priorities, understanding that you don't get to do everything. There's never been a Blue Angel, Top Gun astronaut yet. So you kind of figure out what is it you want to do, which, if you had the opportunity, which one do you want and why do you want it? And hopefully that lets you kind of make those good choices, between A and B as you move down the road. And just realize that, if you don't always get what you want, but if you kind of, put in good effort, you hopefully get something that you can find rewarding. So, you're never going to get everything, but, just understand what you want, sit down, think about it. What do you value? Is it being home with wife and family? Is it, opportunities to travel and go out and see really exciting things? Is it, lots of flight time? And make your choices accordingly and understand that, that's what you wanted. So.
Excellent answer. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I heard somebody say, oh, I didn't think I'd be here, or I don't think I would do this, I could have already retired. So, I mean, it's great advice and a great reflective and great advice to give to the next generation coming forward. So excellent answer. All right, this is of the last submitted questions, and then we have to get into my poorly worded questions afterwards. But this question was, what do you think is the difference between flying, and I'll kind of take a little liberty here, fixed wing in, actual in the airplane versus a UAV? And that covers all types, but the MQ-4 is probably what this question was specifically revolved around. That is a fixed wing, I believe, as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It is. So it's really interesting. We're still really early days in UAS and how should we fly these things? Who should fly these things? But I would say one real truth that I think is emerging is that the responsibilities of the pilot are never going to go away, right? The pilot is still in charge of aviating, navigating, communicating. We don't have the systems evolved to the point that we can actually say, oh, well, this is an artificial intelligent, T-1000 thing that's going to go off and be, kind of self-determinant in how it's going to fly around. So the real differences are kind of in how we engage with the automation and the autonomous systems. And in honesty, the two types are kind of working towards each other, where if you look at a lot of modern aircraft, things like the Autoland systems, they're kind of working their way towards the autonomy that you see in these unmanned aircraft. And a lot of ways, those autonomous systems are working their back down towards where they can, better facilitate the needs of the control of the pilot to change those. I don't know that you're ever going to, be sitting in a chair in a room somewhere and imagine that you're actually in an airplane flying around. But when it comes time to that integration, that interaction, that the way you're going to interact with the system, whether you're always going to have a way of interacting with the aircraft with a stick and rudder, that might actually go away, or at least kind of ameliorate itself in some way, to where, a lot of folks now already probably fly the airplane more with the MCP and the FMC than they do with the yoke and throttle. So It's a really interesting time. And I think it's one of those spots that's really going to develop and kind of find some changes in how we fly airplanes.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree. And well, unless 5G winds up taking out all of the Autoland capability, and then we're back to square one. But
yeah,
I could have a little fun with that. Okay, so you were, so that's actually a good transition. So you were the lead test pilot, I believe, for the MQ4 program. How were you selected for that route? I mean, I know sometimes it's, as simple as you having to apply, but tell us a little bit about that process, how you went from being, flying in the Pacific all the way up to running that program.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, one that a lot of my midshipmen ask, folks are really interested about, flight tests and how do you get into that kind of a job. And, it did help that I had a background in engineering. My undergraduate degree was aerospace engineering here from the Naval Academy. Although I would preface that with that's not the reason I got selected. An ability to understand the mathematics and the physics behind aircraft is really important to really kind of be able to go into there and to be able to communicate with the engineers and talk in the same language. But I would say, almost more importantly is, performing well in your aircraft. That was probably the de facto thing that selects people between whether they get invited to join the test piloting community versus those who aren't. And you need to be that professional who's always striving for perfection, who's trying to make the best every day out of their flights and be better the next day. Not being satisfied just because your flight was okay and you're kind of within standards you're going to get by. That extends not just into flying the aircraft, but tactics as well. One of the things with the P3 and P8 aircraft is there's a huge number of mission sets that you can do, and each one is more or less an entire course of study in the details and the small minutia that you get into, so you can make those good decisions tactically when you actually are out flying the aircraft. And it really takes that that ability to approach it professionally, knowing that you're going to try and make yourself absolutely the best you can be. And when you do that, you typically end up with a good performance, and that's what really the community is looking for. So folks who are going to put in that good effort, work hard to not just be okay, not just to get by, but to kind of strive to really perform and be better every single day.
I hear a lot in there about those 3 lessons from before that you were telling us, which is, don't be sloppy. So that's performing at your best, learning from every flight and the debrief, and then having fun. Because obviously you can be great at 1 and 2, but if you're just absolutely miserable to fly with, you're probably not going to be invited to do anything fun.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, it's not easy, being these aren't the things that you kind of, you get really good at just flying once a month. When it comes time to naval aviation, military aviation in general, the way you get from not knowing how to fly an airplane to land on an aircraft carrier in 2 years is it takes time and effort and dedication. So, it's not just a 9-to-5 kind of job. It's a, kind of putting your heart and soul into it. And, one of those things that, you got to be dedicated to it. It's not something you can just kind of put down and pick up when you leave and come back into work. So that type of dedication is kind of what leads to success. And that's what, folks are kind of looking for when they pick those different folks to join the flight test community.
Excellent. What skills would you recommend developing other than what you had kind of already spoke about? What physical skill would you recommend honing to better your chances of going down that road?
Physical skill is an interesting one. Precision in your flying is really important, and being able to really kind of understand and control your aircraft. One of the skills that I actually think is really underrated in aviation and is the ability to communicate, and not just communicate talking, but written communication. being able to really state your point very clearly and concisely and be able to kind of make a good argument. When you look at the flight test community, a lot is kind of placed on the, I guess, the excitement of, doing something that's, beyond the envelope, being the first person to ever do something in an airplane. But the majority of the job is really to be able to kind of talk back to the engineers and the folks who are designing the aircraft or buying the aircraft and make a good convincing argument of why something is adequate or not adequate. Every time you find something wrong with an airplane, typically that means money to somebody, money or time. And, when they have to open up their checkbooks, you got to be real convincing that what you think is right. And so that's one of those skills I think is maybe underdeveloped to a point. The flying, it takes being a good pilot, a good stick, being very precise, but those are things you can work on. And, we can really get most pilots with, good concerted effort to be able to fly the airplane. Being able to go out there, have the discipline to execute the test as you have it designed, and then be able to communicate the results. That's what I think makes a really good test pilot.
Excellent clarification. I very much agree with that communication aspect, even though I'm stumbling over myself a lot in this interview. So how did going through the test pilot school program and then, going through the actual test, being a test pilot, how did that expand your appreciation for the engineering behind the aircraft you'd flown in the past, the aircraft you're teaching now, the aircraft you're going to fly in the future? What did that do for you?
Yeah. I think, I approached aviation from the pilot side. And, as you learn to fly airplanes, you get really into part 61 and part 91 and, kind of learn all those regulations, rules of the road. But there's so much, kind of hidden in that, part 23 side of things of, the lessons learned and, why things are the way they are. It's really easy to accept that this is what it should be, and it either is or it isn't. But why is it there? And what are those risks that come about in going on? And there's so much analysis that's happened. They put together an aircraft, and sometimes good, sometimes bad, but they don't just kind of accidentally look the way they do. The designers aren't building the airplane because they think it looks cool. There's generally something in there that they're really trying to optimize, and there's tons of effort that goes into it. And tons of regulation hurdles as well, right? And again, you're looking at the 5G towers, and the idea of, hey, we're going to spread out some of this electrical energy near the airports, and what impact could that have? And these are big, super complicated constraints that can be put on aircraft, challenges, and there's no just one person kind of just scribbling something on a piece of paper and saying, oh, well, this should be close enough. Our aviation industry works really hard to build safe aircraft. And, there's a lot of time and effort. And it, unfortunately, makes development expensive and time consuming. But in the end, what you get are some really good products that, the pilots and the passengers can all rely on.
Excellent. So let's shift a little bit to your P8 time and your P3, although I believe you said you rolled out the P8 in Japan, but how was being based in Hawaii and then I guess Japan or Japan? You can answer both or either or neither.
Yeah. My first operational squadron was based in Hawaii on Oahu, Kaneohe Bay, which is just on the other side of the mountains from Honolulu there. And Hawaii is amazing. And one of the things is that flying in Hawaii is, some of the most beautiful places you can fly. And we had this really interesting kind of effect in that, the P3 is a fairly large aircraft, fairly quick, and, based on an airliner, the Lockheed, the Electra. And so most squadrons that were based in CONUS, in the continental United States, Jacksonville or Whidbey Island, a typical training flight for them would be you take off and you go fly an hour and a half away, and then you do some approaches and some touch and goes, and you fly the hour and a half back to your home port. Hawaii, you really can't fly an hour and a half away and get to anywhere. So what we ended up doing was we spent a lot of that time just doing really cool VFR flying around the islands. And flying around the Nepali coast on Kauai, around the northern shore of Molokai, where you had these, just incredible 1,000-foot cliffs diving down into the sea. Flying down around the south side of the Big Island, where you've got the volcano going on. Just, some of the most amazing VFR flying you could ever imagine. It didn't do great for developing instrument flying skills or flying in bad weather. So, we had a squadron that deployed from Kaneohe, and they went right to Misawa, Japan, which is northern Japan, in January. So you had guys who hadn't worn anything but flip-flops for a year. They were all of a sudden, flying through, huge, snowstorms and landing on icy runways and having to figure all that out on the fly. So beautiful flying weather, not great for preparing you for bad weather, but, just living in Hawaii also, just, some of the, the most welcoming and, laid back folks you could ever imagine. And, one of the really great things about the Navy is that tend to put their bases near the beach. So no matter where you go, you're typically not too far from getting in the ocean, which is always a lot of fun.
Excellent. So correct me if I'm wrong, and I did aircraft wreck, so this is an aircraft wreck nerd thing, but the P3 has the engine mounted upside down on it, doesn't? Is that the one?
Well, it depends. If you ask a C-130 guy, that's what they would say. Yeah, it's a low wing. Where C-130 is high wing, so the engine's kind of on the opposite side there. But yeah, very similar wing and it's similar engine to what you see on the C-130s. The new J's have the newer model engines, but we had the Allison engines on ours, the Allison engines, and so very similar to what you'd find on a classic C-130, and super reliable, super rugged airframe. And when you look at the P3's service history, we just stopped operationally flying them in the past couple of years. So we just sundowed the last couple squadrons. We still have EP3s flying out of Whidbey Islands, and so they may be on for another year or two. But their operational history goes all the way back into the early 60s. So, well outstripped the lifespan of the F-14s and F-4s and the baby Hornets, the Cs and the Ds, and so super rugged, super reliable, super effective aircraft. Not necessarily the sexiest one to see, sitting on the ramp, but definitely a great airplane if you want to go flying.
Well, and another cool roundabout thing, the Allison engine that's on it, and this one I knew about, or this part I knew from my previous airline, is actually the core of the Rolls Royce that now hangs on the 145 and the Citation 10. So they took that and then did whatever they had to do, and then they expanded, put the fan on, inducted it, and it's cool to think that a lot of people that and a lot of people that go to the regionals or fly corporate in the Citation 10 are actually flying a variant of what's on the P3. So it's kind of a neat little world how everything comes together. So the P3, the P8 is the 737 that is obviously the civilian world can't buy. And you're essentially sub hunting, right? That's the primary mission of the P8.
Yep, that's the primary mission. Yep.
So what you got? Any interesting stories to tell us about the P8?
Well, so the P8 is really interesting, and the big difference in the community as we went from the P3, which was the turboprop, to the turbojet or turbofan P8, was just the speed that we had with the aircraft. When you look inside, it's also brand new mission system. So we have a lot of the acoustic gear. So when we're looking for submarines, typically you don't look for them, you actually listen for them. You drop a sonobuoy in the water and you kind of listen around, and do you hear it kind of zinging by? And so we were able to get a really good upgrade on the mission systems that went inside of it. And what we found is that, like with the P3 and how the P3 has been around for so long, there's a lot of utility in having a kind of a big airplane that has a lot of power generated on it, electrical power. Each one's got a 180 kVA generator on board. So there's a lot of utility and a lot of really cool things you can do. And one of the big differences from the P3 we found was that that speed in getting on station. And VP 16, our first deployment happened, we were on Kadena Air Force Base during the MH370 incident. And we were detached down to Australia to support with search and rescue efforts not too long after the aircraft was lost. And one of the AORs, or one of the search areas we were looking for, was about 1,200 miles off Perth. So, if you can imagine 1,200 miles out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, then you got to sit there and look for something, and then you got to fly 1,200 miles back. And hopefully, fuel plans such that if anything does happen on that transit back, you'll be okay. And, just the range, for the P3, 1,200 miles is a, 3 or 4 hour trip. So it takes you a long time out there. So even though you may be able to fly for a little bit more time, you might be able to get a 10-hour mission out of the aircraft. You're probably getting 2 hours on station. Where that P8, we could transit that 1,200 miles and get 4 hours of searching in the location and then fly our transit back. And so, really when you're talking about covering large areas of water, stuff that, you don't know what's out there until you go out and look. The P8 with its speed gives you just an incredible increase in range, and what you can really kind of get to is, kind of your operational radius. So, so those are, some of the really cool things you've been able to do. We've had missions where from Okinawa, Canadian Air Force Base, which is, very southern Japan, we were able to fly missions out near Adak, Alaska. And so in a single day, you can take off there, do a mission, we're interacting with someone in that region, and then make it back. And, just the ability to get places and cover areas and, go look and see what's out there. Really, really impressive for the P8.
Excellent. Well, then the last question that I have written down, where'd your call sign come from? If you can tell us that story.
Yeah, the call sign's interesting. Navy call signs, they're not meant to be flattering. That's generally the first rule. The more you hate your call sign, the more it's going to stick to you. I like my call sign, but it came from really early on in my first squadron. And I think this kind of speaks a little bit to some of the camaraderie and some of the, the unity and fraternity you get being in a military unit. I had just showed up out of Hawaii, and there was a baby shower. And it was the first baby shower I'd ever gone to. But when you're in the military, especially in a flight squadron, the baby shower was everyone in the wardroom. And so we had 3 kegs of beer and, a huge, thing of pizza laid out. And I think we had a, pay-per-view fight on or something like that. And really, really most raucous baby shower there probably had been, or at least most I'd ever been to. And so as we kind of continue on through the night, I might have been a little overserved. And so, I got kind of dancy, and eventually, a couple days later, the name Magic Mike started appearing attached to me. And so, and once you're known as Magic Mike, the call sign's too good to lose. So it stuck around with me ever since then.
I had thought of maybe 5 different stories that would have answered that, but not that. And I never put it together to flip the names around to have that come up. But that's well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, that's all my questions. I've exhausted it. Do you have any parting words or thoughts for the competitors and our NIFA folks watching at home?
Yeah, NIFA is a great organization to be a part of. That focus on safety, that focus on kind of working towards getting better in the airplane, and kind of that working down to get the precision in your flying. Get kind of be better than just good enough. And there's lots of different ways to make money and kind of support yourself flying airplanes. And if the idea of service kind of appeals to you, maybe go talk to someone about what military aviation can do for you. So yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you very much. And on behalf of NIFA, once more, thank you to Lieutenant Commander Mike Magic McLean And thank you for your service once more. And to everybody else, thank you for joining us or watching at home after the fact. And if you have any further questions for Mike, feel free to send them my way. I'll be happy to forward them on and connect you all. Next month, we're still finalizing the details, but we believe we'll have somebody from American Airlines with us to talk about their recruitment efforts. And then after that, we'll announce our next speaker for March. So we thank everybody for joining us tonight. Have a great evening, and